So, welcome all to the Lesbian Fiction Campfire celebration of Australian authors. We have four authors from the other side of the world here with us this morning. Well, it's morning here, but it's very late where they are. So, let's give them some grace if they're a little fatigued from a long day. I just want to let you all know what the Lesbian Fiction Campfire is about. It was started during COVID when everyone was sharing work and we were getting these free museum tours and all that other stuff. So I thought, well, I know a whole bunch of lesbian authors, so why not just get them together and we can share our work with one another? Because it was such a frightening time for everybody, I chose the safest place that I could imagine, which is my favorite campground up in Acadia National Park. And that became the sort of conceit for the campfire. So 5 years later, we're still, continuing the tradition. And today we have these wonderful women from Australia to share their work with us. So, who would like to go first? I don't usually do that. I usually just call on someone, but I'll let you guys volunteer. If not, I'll choose one of you.
I can rip off the band-aid and just do it.
All right. Good for you, Shay. Go on then. Tell us all about you and what you're going to read.
Okay. My name is Shay Paris. I live in Perth, Western Australia. So it's not too late for me. It's 10 p.m. It's not midnight for me like the others. I'm going to be doing a reading from my latest book, Forget Me Not, which is that one up there. That one came out in January. It was just recently narrated by Laurie Prince, and I've just listened to the entire recording, and I don't think that I'm ever going to read it as well as she does, but I will give it my best shot. Here we go. Okay, I said, clearing my throat, feeling a little lighter. Your turn then. What kind of trauma has a chokehold on you? Gracie tipped her head back and let out a throaty laugh, and I couldn't help but let my gaze slip to her neck, imagining the softness of her skin there, how it would feel to press my lips against it. Honestly, I had a pretty standard upbringing, she admitted with a little shrug. Nothing stands out as particularly traumatic, though I did go to an all-girls Catholic school, so sometimes I find random hymns running through my head and catch myself worrying about the length of my skirt. I grew up pretty privileged, though. My dad owns a bunch of businesses, and my mum was always busy with something. In our early years, she was super involved in my schooling and activities. Now she's all about running the church choir. She spent half my teenage years lobbying for that spot. You grew up surrounded by religion then? I asked, genuinely curious. Yeah, she murmured, her gaze distant. It wasn't that my parents were overly strict, but they were still, and still are, very active in the church. All my schooling was in Catholic schools, so coming to terms with myself was hard. I buried it for years. In high school, I just avoided dating entirely, and then in my first year of college, I met my ex, Dane. He was a really wonderful guy, honestly, too good for me. He had that golden boy thing going on, brown hair, blue eyes, athletic, smart, polite, everything you'd want in a guy. And I was so desperate to be normal that I latched onto him. And my sister, Narelle, she kept making all these little comments about how weird it was that I'd never had a boyfriend, which only made me more paranoid. I was terrified she'd figured me out. So the second Dane showed me some interest, I locked him down. I laughed, recognizing that panicked expression in her eyes. I totally get that, I told her, smiling when her eyes widened. After my parents passed, I got shipped off to live with my grandparents in this dusty little Kansas town. I just started coming to terms with being into girls when one of the cheerleaders waltzed through the locker room half naked after a game. And well, let's just say I had the same reaction every pubescent teenage boy has. I grinned, shrugging. Full on lady boner. Gracie giggled, her cheeks flushing slightly. We had it a little harder than kids do now, didn't we? I mean, not nearly as rough as the generations before us, but it wasn't exactly an open topic when I was in high school. I remember this one girl in my class was accused of being a lesbian, and she got bullied so relentlessly that her parents unenrolled her. The other girls refused to sit with her at lunch, and I'm ashamed to say that I went along with it. I was just so terrified that it could be me, you know? Yeah, I mean, your environment plays a huge role in how you act, I said, shrugging, especially as a teenager. If you don't feel safe, you'll just blend in until you do. I started having suspicions about myself around 13. I remember freshman year, all my friends were so boy obsessed, and I couldn't imagine anything worse. But when my best friend back then, Jackie, wanted to practice kissing, I was more than happy to help her out. Gracie burst out laughing just as the waiter arrived with our fresh drinks. I wish I'd talked to my mum about it, I admitted, stirring the orange garnish in my drink with my straw. Do you think they would have been okay with it? Gracie asked softly. I nodded, feeling certain. Yeah, they were pretty laid back people, but back when I was a teenager, realizing I was different felt terrifying. I wasn't ready to talk about it. Now, looking back with a more grown up perspective, I know it would have been fine. I'm envious, Gracie said with a sigh. When I see those parents at Pride offering mum hugs or dad hugs, I just ache for this other life that I could have had, one where I wasn't stuck in constant turmoil, hating myself because of the environment I grew up in. I nodded, understanding all too well. Living with my grandparents had felt like stepping back into an unyielding, outdated world. A little over a year ago, I told my mum that I liked girls, Gracie said, her voice dropping to a more subdued tone. And I'd known for a long time this wasn't just some passing phase. She paused, looking down at her glass as if the memory still stung. She and I were always close, so keeping something like that from her was hell, honestly. When I finally told her, she just brushed it off, called me ridiculous, and then proceeded to give me sex tips with Dane in case that was the issue. Gracie grimaced, and I almost choked on my drink, struggling to keep a straight face. I told her it wasn't that, she continued, her expression turning pained. This was who I'd been for a long time now. The sadness in her voice hinted at where this was going, but I still found myself asking gently, how did she take it? Ugh, Gracie groaned, running a hand through her wild hair. She didn't take it well, told me it couldn't happen under her roof and that I should keep it to myself. Basically warned me I'd lose everyone if I acted on it openly. She shook her head, a flicker of pain in her eyes. It was such a messy time. I ended up moving out and Dane and I broke up. Do you talk to her, your family, at all? Gracie shrugged, letting out a heavy sigh. Off and on, but it's not the same. I go around for family events and stuff, but it feels distant. Dad still lectures me on why music's a bad idea and tells me it's not a stable career and tries to get me to work for him. And Narelle, well, she's Narelle. She does her best to survive our family just like I do. Family is the worst, I muttered, feeling the warmth for my drink. You could go a few rounds with them in the ring and still give them a kidney if they needed it. Exactly, Gracie laughed, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. It's the most complicated feeling, loving and hating people at the same time. Well, that's why I try not to be too hard on people, I said with a grin, and I never trust a first impression. Everyone's got their own stuff going on and everyone's the main character in their own story. It's not my place to play judge and jury. Gracie ran her tongue over the salted rim of her glass, and I tried not to let it distract me. I wish I could be like that, but I'm way too opinionated, she admitted, letting out a soft sigh. I tend to judge first, then think it over and eventually come around. And that's how you ended up wearing that drink when we first met. I smirked, feeling my courage surge, and let a hint of flirtation slip through, just enough to pull her closer without pushing it too far. Slowly, I traced my fingers along her wrist, letting them dance up her arm as I said, and because I don't judge a first impression, I made your assigned instructor step back so I could take over your classes at the gym. Gracie blinked, looking momentarily dazed, her lips parting slightly as goosebumps rose on her skin. You don't usually take personal training sessions? I shook my head with a wicked grin, letting my hand trail further up her arm, lingering at her shoulder before resting at the delicate point between her neck and collarbone, marveling at the softness of her skin. No, I said, my eyes locking onto hers. Only for celebrities. Oh, she murmured, her gaze flicking from my eyes to my lips, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. My thumb brushed gently along her neck, feeling her pulse quicken beneath it. I had a thought about you too, Gracie, I said, my voice dripping as I edged closer, the fire crackling beside us and the cool night air wrapping around us in a gentle breeze. I gave her a second, just enough time to pull back if this wasn't what she wanted, but she held still, her breath hitching. Then I closed the distance, bringing her lips to mine, and in that moment my mind went blissfully silent, as if someone had flicked off a switch. The usual torrent of thoughts swirling in my mind faded, zeroing in on one simple truth: how incredibly good it felt to be kissing Gracie Starr by a crackling fire. She was soft and responsive, her lips parting to welcome me in a way that made me feel as if I'd been invited into something private and profound. The taste of her gin and tonic lingered sweetly on her tongue, adding a hint of zest, and I decided right then that I wanted to be unforgettable to her, a kiss she'd never compare with anyone else. The air buzzed between us with electricity, as if the fire wasn't just beside us but inside us. Gracie kissed me back with the same intensity, her hand settling over my wrist where it rested lightly against her neck. When I gave a subtle squeeze, she let out the softest moan, and it sent a thrill through me. For now, this was enough, but there was no mistaking that I wanted more. If we weren't in public, I'd waste no time in laying her down and savoring her like she was my last meal. The thought alone sent a fresh wave of heat through me, but this kiss confirmed that what I felt for her was more than just physical. Sure, the attraction was undeniably intense, but I genuinely liked her. She was the most authentic person I'd met in LA in a long time, never hesitating to call me out on my shit. The way she'd grabbed my face earlier and told me to get a grip, God, that had me undone. Her tongue danced with mine, then surrendered, and I smirked against her mouth, nipping at her bottom lip just enough to make her gasp. Finally, I pulled back just an inch, letting us catch our breath. Wow, Gracie whispered, her breath short, her hazel eyes searching mine, wide and vulnerable, like a deer in headlights, and damn if that didn't just make me want her all over again. Let me take you out, I murmured, letting my hand drop from her neck to toy with the half-moon pendant resting between her collarbones. On a real date. She looked at me, nerves flickering across her face, and I was glad. I wanted her a little off balance. Up until now, it felt like she'd had the upper hand, but I knew how to woo a woman. Only I didn't want to just impress Gracie. I wanted to keep her, lock her down, but obviously one step at a time, starting with a date. Okay, she agreed, biting her lip before letting out a giggle. My brain is basically static right now. I chuckled softly and let go of the pendant, my hand drifting up to cup her cheek. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second before she refocused on me. She was so receptive to touch. It was a relief to have crossed that line without getting another drink thrown in my face. Hey, Kat's voice rang out from the doorway, making us both turn. If you two lovebirds are done getting frisky out there, do you want to come in for a game of pool? The end.
That was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. And I love your background with your cover thing there.
Thank you.
Do you have an Amazon link you can put in the chat?
Yes, I can get one. I will find it and pop it in there.
Okay, that would be great. All right, who would like to read next?
I can go next
All
if
right,
that's okay.
Thea.
Excellent. This is from my debut novel, Principal Decisions. Sorry.
Excuse me. Tell us a little bit about yourself, okay?
Oh, yeah. I grew up in a country town in Albury, and then I moved up to the city. I now live in Sydney with my cat. But before I moved to Sydney, I moved to Wollongong and Canberra separately. And I, in both areas, got into the kink scene. So that's how I came to eventually come to write my current book. So this book is about two women who are in their 50s. It is about kink and acceptance. So this is what Principal Decisions is. Vivian arrived 15 minutes early and sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel as she tried to understand how she'd gotten there. She was outside a dominatrix business house, wearing slinky lingerie and a new dress. She had put more effort into how she looked for this appointment than when she went to work. Was this her life now? Driving out in the middle of nowhere to get spanked? Apparently so, because she looked in the rearview mirror to fix her lipstick. A blush spread across her cheek. She got out of the car, walked up to the building, and rang the doorbell, counting her racing heartbeats until she could hear the sound of Celine's heels on the hardwood floor. A shadow appeared behind the door just before the dominatrix opened it. Her hair looked as though she had recently run her fingers through it. She leaned against the doorframe with an eyebrow cocked in a wait for Vivian to speak, just as she had at that grocery store. Damn her. Vivian's breath caught. She was torn between shrinking away and pushing further forward to assert her own dominance. Evening, she managed to say. Evening. Selena appraised Vivian's body, and she took in a slow, noticeable breath, as if she couldn't wait to devour her. Well, Celine returned, her gaze to Vivian's eye. Are you going to let me in, or shall I recall some password? Oh, I like the idea of a secret password. What do you think it is? Vivian crossed her arms, considering whether to turn around and leave, but before she could act on the half-formed thought, Celine laughed, pushed off from the door frame, and stepped aside. Vivian glared at her to make sure she knew how unimpressed she was. She stepped inside the warm hallway and removed her coat. Suddenly, she felt overdressed. Celine closed the door and stepped around in front of her. Vivian held her ground, refusing to step away. You look well, Celine commented, less frightened. Anger flared inside Vivian. I beg your pardon. I was not frightened. At the grocery store, you certainly were. I could have said, boo, and you would have run away screaming. Or maybe just melted into a puddle on the floor. She stared at Vivian's mouth as she spoke. Difficult to say. Vivian swallowed hard. Have anything for me? Celine asked, stepping forward again. Vivian took a step back. I have an appointment tomorrow, she said. Celine smiled wider. You won't regret it. And personally, I'm looking forward to it. She turned around and Vivian followed her up the stairs into the bedroom before she turned to face her. Do you know what you want? Vivian's heart pounded. She wanted the same as last time, to just forget the world and feel alive. I trust you, she said. Celine nodded. I have an idea. And what is that? Vivian asked. I've been thinking about you. Celine opened the dresser drawer. I know exactly what you want, Vivian. She drew out 2 lengths of red rope and a blindfold, then turned to face Vivian again. You want the illusion of lost control. She dropped the items into the center of the room. Vivian looked at them, both relieved and disappointed to see there wasn't a riding crop on the floor. Take off your dress, Celine said. Vivian obeyed, reaching behind to unzip and then rolled the dress down to the floor, stepping out of it. This is to come off too, she said, pointing to the slip. Vivian felt a quiver low in her belly as she shimmied out of it. Celine looked Vivian over and again smiled broadly. You'll need more patience this time. Put your clothes away, heels too, and then we'll begin. Vivian bit her lip, picking her clothes up off the floor and setting them neatly inside the ottoman. She hated how the woman made her feel like a child. Do you remember your safe word this time? I do. What is it? Music box. Vivian felt ridiculous as she said it, but the point of a safe word was to be jarring enough that both of them knew it needed to end. I'm going to tie you up, Celine said, and then we'll see where you're at. If you're still comfortable, I'll blindfold you and engage in some light impact play. At any stage, you can tell me to slow down. If it gets to be too much, say your safe word, and if you forget, you can let me know you've forgotten it. Vivian nodded. Without warning, Celine sharpened her expression. On your knees. Vivian felt the command slip over her like a burlap bag as she fell to her knees on the hardwood floor. Celine pulled up a wooden stool and sat on it, looking far more elegant than anyone had a right to on such a small seat. If you ever want to learn this, I can teach you, Celine said and held out her hand. Vivian placed her hand face up into Celine's palm and watched her toss the length of a rope over her wrist. When I lived in New York, I used to run workshops with other dominatrix. She held out her hand again. I've been doing ropes since I was basically a young girl, I suppose. May I speak? Vivian asked, unsure if the game had begun. You may speak. We're still setting up. Celine tied a knot on Vivian's other hand. You'll know when we've begun. Celine wove the ropes in a spiderweb pattern up and down Vivian's arms while explaining about the different knots she was tying and the safety precautions she had in place so that any time Vivian needed to get out, Celine could release her quickly. It was fascinating to watch the knots being tied and adjusted. Celine moved expertly, as if she'd been tying knots for years, which she probably had, tying herself up as well as others. Are you doing this because of last session? Vivian asked as Celine began drawing the rope over her wrist. Not for the reasons you think, Celine said. You were relaxed when I tied you up before. Most people panic at being unable to move, but you were entirely at ease. She brushed her fingertips over Vivian's stomach as she slipped and weaved the rope, keeping one end in her lap. I thought I might indulge the rope bunny in you. And then she dragged her fingers across Vivian's skin, stroking her ribs. Vivian drew in a breath, trying to focus on the feeling of the rope. Turn around. Vivian scooted around on her knees until her back was to Celine. She drew Vivian's hair over her shoulders before resuming the rope pattern. A shiver shot down Vivian's spine as Celine tightened a knot. Vivian cleared her throat. So you've used ropes from the beginning. What about anything else? You'll have to be more specific. Celine rested her hand just below Vivian's brow. She could easily undo it if she wanted to, and Vivian could do nothing to stop her. When did you decide to become a dominatrix? It's not as interesting as you might think, she said, resuming her work with rope. Girl meets boy, boy wants to try things with girl. Girl is much better at it than boy. Boy becomes sulky, so girl leaves. Tale as old as time. Vivian scoffed. Sounds like most men. Oh, yes, Celine said, and then without warning, Vivian felt a breath brush over her shoulder, a nail tracing a pattern onto her skin. Don't worry, though. If you're interested in domination, I'll play with you. I'm very good on my knees. Vivian closed her eyes, heat flickering low on her belly. She was starting to get an idea of what Celine had been getting at before. There, Celine pressed a kiss against on Vivian's shoulders. Now lie on your back. Vivian shifted as much as she could on her own, then Celine's hand was on her, helping her ease down into the floor. Celine stood up, picked up her stool, and sat down by Vivian's feet. She began unraveling the second piece of rope. You're not done? Vivian asked. I told you, this was about patience. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of time to play with whatever toy you want. Celine lifted Vivian's foot from the floor and began tying it. In her state of undress, tied up and lying on the ground, Vivian watched Celine lift one leg following the other onto her lap, binding her ankles together. But she didn't stop there. Vivian's thoughts reeled in the fantasy. She slipped the rope up Vivian's leg, slipping over calves and thighs and loops like fishnets. Vivian looked away as she felt the rope slip over the highest part of her thigh. There are certain knots you can tie, Celine said, lacing the rope around Vivian's inner thigh, that can induce arousal while the occupant squirms in their bindings. I'm aware, Vivian said, her voice heavy with desire. Is that what you're doing? If you want, Celine said. I can also do it so you'll have no relief from it. Vivian imagined herself bound and squirming, the rope rubbing between her thighs, close but not touching. She bit her lip. And how much would you need to charge for either of those? To make you squirm, I can just adjust it. But I could get you off as it is. Vivian laughed. I'm sure you could, considering how quick your hands work. Oh no, you misunderstood. I could make you come without my hands ever touching you. Vivian raised her eyebrow. Celine might be talented, but it would take more than a well-placed rope to bring her to ecstasy. You can try, but it won't work. Celine gently lowered Vivian's legs to the ground. That sounds like a challenge. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to open it up briefly to questions for Thea and Shay. Um, Thank you. Shay just put her contact information on Amazon in the chat, and I put Thea's in from her questionnaire earlier. So if you want to find how to get their books, you can see them. I have to admit, Thea, that it's hard for me to write a sex scene in a novel. We grew up at a time when people were more guarded about what they said about sex. So when somebody reads erotica, it's always refreshing to hear how bold people can be when they write. Um, that was a quite a stimulating scene that you read from.
Thank you. My parents are both artists, so I think that I was very lucky to be raised in such a world where like from a young age, you'd go to art gallery openings filled with naked artworks. My parents were just had such a healthy attitude for me to just take in what I wanted to and what I didn't.
So is erotica what you primarily write?
Yeah, erotic is what I primarily. Yeah, I do write romance. I'd love to delve into fantasy and some other stuffs, but erotica is the most natural thing for me to write.
And Shay, how about you? Do you write romance, right?
Yes, romance. Like you said, I do struggle writing the smut scenes. I do like to sprinkle them in, but it's the funniest thing to write. I think I'm just such an immature person sometimes, honestly. I just get the giggles and I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I writing right now? Um, but I think opposite to Thea, I had a very I guess closed upbringing. And I mean, much like Gracie's character, I grew up in a very religious family. So there's not much, self-expression or freedom in that sort of environment. So still on my own little journey there. I'll just keep writing and see if I giggle less.
Um, well, guilty as charged. I had 12 years of Catholic education and then 4 years of a Catholic university. So I know all about that kind of very religious, strict attitudes towards sex. But one of my worries always is, I wonder if people will think this is what I do in bed, you know?
Yes,
And
every time.
I try never to write, I have to put my own hand down. I just raised my hand and now it became,
Zoom saw it and decided that you wanted
yeah,
to raise
this
your
new
hand
AI
officially.
business. It's very scary. God knows what it's going to make us do one day, you know? Um, maybe it will suddenly make your story come alive on the screen, Thea, and then we'll all be like, oh, you know. But
I'm hoping that is far, far, far in my future until like I don't see it.
uh, John, I see you've got your hand up. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll do the video here too. Whoops, pardon me. Uh, yeah, I just wish to make a slight note. Um, Elena and I went to a Jesuit university, which may not exactly be the same as what you would think of a Catholic university, but we want to get into, I don't think we want to get into a discussion about that right now.
Well, we definitely were privileged not to have the party line imposed on us where we went to school, John.
Yes, we just had the Saturday night party line.
All right. Well, let's get back to our readings. Who would like to read next? We have Lyn and Samira left to read for us.
I'll go if you don't mind, Lyn. Okay. All right. Well, nice to meet everybody. I'm Samira. So I normally live in Sydney, but I'm actually visiting my sister in London right now, which is why I have this lovely actual sunlight on me. It's not the middle of the night for me. I went to university in Wollongong, so me and Thea probably have some friends in common. In fact, I'm pretty sure we maybe do. And I studied creative writing. And actually, it was while I was at university that I had the idea for my debut novel, which I'm going to read from today. When I say I had the idea, it's actually based on my housemate at the time's dream, but she let me use her idea. So this is my novel. It's called Wastelands, and it's a bit of a change of pace. So it's not romance, it's not erotica, it's science fiction. It only has a minor, like, romantic subplot. So I'm going to give you guys a bit of context for my reading. So this is a post-apocalyptic dystopian science fiction. There's been a climate apocalypse, and in this world there are no plants or animals. So the only way that people have survived is that they live in these domes under a fascist regime, and everywhere outside of the dome is like unsurvivable unless you're wearing like a climate control suit, and those only last for a few hours. And my main character, Cara Dre, has had this recurring dream of a plant growing. So that was the bit that was based off my housemate's dream. So she has this recurring dream, and in seeking out this plant, she, like, a series of events happen. She gets caught in a rebel bar, and the penalty for that is death. So she's waiting with like a group of other people to be put to death when this rebel woman who she has met before and found very interesting comes and rescues them all. And so that's where the reading is going to take place. So, Rin was directing the others to get dressed in climo suits. A few of the middies trailed behind, bewildered and unsure, but the others hurried them into the suits. I picked one up and started pulling it on over my clothes. Everything felt unreal, like a dream. Well, hey there, bootlicker, Rin said, walking over with a pair of gloves in her hand. Hey, glad to see me? She helped me attach one glove to the sleeve, locking it into place with confident efficiency, as if she used climo suits every day. She was standing so close I could smell her hair, a nice human smell. I swallowed, my mouth dry. Look, I can't say I'm sad about it, given the alternative. Besides, breaking into a government facility, stealing a Trans-H, and saving a bunch of prisoners waiting to die? You guys are going to go from infamous to legends. Rin laughed, and my heart banged against my ribs like a mad thing. I swallowed. How come talking to this woman made me feel more nervous and excited than heading for the outside in an old, battered Trans-H full of strangers? So, I've got to ask, this dream you had, the one that brought you from mid-dome to Slummet in the Rim, was it worth all this? Her dark eyes were steady on mine as she waited for my answer. It would have been, if it was what I thought. What was it? My gaze wandered around the courtyard and came to rest on the fountain. At the bottom, where the water never left, a green sludge had formed. I walked over, my climo suit only half on, and scooped some of it up in my hand. Using the slime, I drew a crude copy of the plant from my dream on the wall. Just 3 long, curving lines emerging from a central point and falling in different directions. I had a dream of something green, of life growing, a plant in the rim. Rin stared from me to the drawing. Her eyes seemed to swallow it, like she could see beyond the crude image, see what I had seen. Oi, you coming? A voice called from the Trans-H. Jerked out of our shared daze, we hurried over to the H. I pulled the climo suit the rest of the way on and attached the other glove. It clicked into place, closing the seam so no air could get in or out. The H hovered at the entrance to a steep ramp that was lowering down into what I had thought was solid ground. Pone stood next to it, tapping at his tab. I couldn't see anything at the bottom, only darkness. The H was full. I climbed over people's laps and crouched down on the floor, a forest of legs around me. Ryn leaned in and gave me the helmet for my suit. You should have time to put that on before the transport broaches the dome wall. Just. Good luck, bootlicker. I clutched the helmet to my chest. Thanks. She shut the door with a click, and I was slammed back against someone's knees as the H purred to life. We were off and speeding. There was no time to say more. I pushed the helmet frantically over my head, trying to figure out how to make it attach the way the gloves had. After a panicked minute, it clicked into place with a hiss of oxygen releasing. I took a deep, relieved breath and craned my head back. Ryn was long out of sight. The tunnel had swallowed us. The walls raced by on either side, tall and dark. It was only minutes before the tunnel curved upward, a hint of light greeting us up ahead. As we got nearer, I could hear hushed voices and whispers spreading around me. Then I realized we were seeing daylight. Actual daylight. Not electronic light or light that was filtered through the tinted plastic glass of the dome. This was real. Fear mingled with excitement coursed through me. To leave the dome was death. No one left the dome. And yet here we were, hurtling out of the ground and into the outside. I rose to my knees, trying to see. There was nothing but brownish red and orange dust. It moved in eddies and whirls in the air, whipping past the front of the transport. Nothing was visible beyond a few feet. Still, I didn't want to sit back down. I wanted to see everything. After a moment, though, irritated murmurs from the others forced me to hunker down again, cross-legged on the floor. I tried to listen, to hear what outside sounded like. There was nothing but the transport's engine and the wind roaring past from the speed of our passage. After a while, the excitement and adrenaline from broaching the dome faded, and I started feeling almost bored. Bored and tired. My back was sore from sitting in the hunched position on the hard floor, and my legs ached from trying to keep my knees in tight. I hadn't had a drink in 2 days, and I was feeling it. I hurtled through the outside into an uncertain future surrounded by strangers. After who knows how many hours, we stopped. I looked up from where my head had sunk between my knees, my vision blurry. Everyone around me was stirring and piling out of the H. What's happening? I croaked. Refueling stop, someone said. I struggled to my hands and knees and crawled out. The landscape stretched flat and featureless in every direction. The earth was a rusty reddish brown, and deep cracks ran through the ground, some so wide I'd need to leap across, some as narrow as my smallest finger. They traced away from each other in a latticework. Lodged in the cracks here and there were pieces of plastic and rubbish. More rubbish lay loose on the earth, tumbling this way and that at the wind's mercy. There was no trace of water. The ground was dry and thirsty. Small eddies of wind picked up the red earth and blew it through the air. It was mesmerizing, all that movement. The outside of my visor was soon covered in a thin layer of red dust, giving everything a hazy aspect. Okay, everyone, a quick leg stretch while we refuel, and then we continue, someone said. I think it was the man who'd kissed Pone. It was hard to tell when we were all in climo suits. Where are we even going? Asked someone else. A great question. The first speaker, noticing everyone was turned his way, gestured to us to gather around. We're headed from one of the abandoned domes from a few years back. What? Voices tripped over each other in a rising tide of dismay. But they abandoned those domes for a reason. There was some sort of disaster. Their climo control doesn't work anymore. The speaker held up his hands, bulky in the suit's gloves. No, only the rim and the mid-dome don't work. The inner dome is totally functional. But of course, with no middies or rim dwellers to do all the work, the innies didn't want to stay. So the climo control and water purification systems should still work. Theoretically. All we'll need is food. How do you know all this? How will we find food? Pone was looking into it already. He's been thinking about trying to start up some kind of rebel base outside the city, said the man, pride in his voice. He gestured to the tab in his hand that Pone had handed him before we left. He and Ryn had been researching it. You know what they're like with tech. He shrugged. This seemed as good a time as any to give it a shot, since none of us have anything to lose. That's the plan? Someone yelled. Soon everyone was shouting again, debating the merits of the plan. I didn't think it was much of a plan, more like a random hope. I noticed he hadn't addressed the food question either. But he was right that we had nothing to lose, no other real options. I walked away from the group. I'd let them fight it out. I had a splitting headache, my mouth was dry, and I kind of wanted to spew my guts up. My mind turned longingly to pints of bread brew. That would fix it. I glanced back at the group of rebels clustered around the man like some strange bronze insects. The sun bounced off their suits, even through all the dust. I should go and join the conversation, start trying to get to know these people. Best case scenario, I'd be living with them at least for a bit. And then what? Nothing felt quite real. But there'd be plenty of time for introductions, and I wanted to explore the outside. I wandered over a ridge. I realized I was searching the ground, eyes flicking left to right, like maybe if I just searched long enough, I'd find something green, something like my dream, some kind of tree or flower. We'd learned those names in school, seen the pictures, but I couldn't imagine them existing in real life. There was nothing. Nothing but the rust brown of the earth, cracks spreading out in great furrows all the way to the horizon, tumbleweeds of rubbish blowing here and there in the dusty haze and the red sky. Yet it had its own sort of beauty. I'd never seen so much open space, so much colour. The beauty and the vastness almost hurt, soft and painful, and cracking me open. The feeling seemed to rise from the very core of me. Tears pricked my eyes, and I tried to blink them away. A shout interrupted my reverie. I turned back to the H. A rise in the ground hid it from view. I headed back the way I'd come, craning my neck in a fruitless effort to see what was happening. There was another shout, louder this time. I hurried up the hill. The others were gesturing wildly at each other, pointing at a smudge of dust on the far horizon. I shaded my eyes to see, and a cold spike of fear shot through me. It was a Trans H, and it was speeding towards us. There was a flurry of movement as everyone rushed back to the H. I started running, trying to reach them, but no one had seen me. No one had noticed that there were only 12 people getting into the H. I called out as loud as I could, but there was too much shouting going on already, and I was too far away. The last few members of the group around the H hurried in. The Trans H shot away, leaving me alone on the empty plain. The end.
Thank you, Samira. I did promise a break and I forgot to give us one. Does anybody want to take a break? If you do, please raise your hand. All right, we're good. So let's ask Lyn to read.
Oh, right. G'day from Brisbane, the capital of sunny Queensland on the east coast of Australia. I'm Lyn Denison, and I've been writing romances for many, 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 many years. I'm very appropriately dressed with my favourite hoodie, which says romance writer, just like a normal writer, only much cooler. Now, books have always been part of my life. I was a kid who read a lot of books. Then I became a librarian who read a lot of books. And now I'm a writer who read a lot of books. So I'm going to be reading from my book, My Road Found You, which is the 5th in my Friends and Lovers series. Number 6 is in the pipeline. They're all standalones, and you don't have to read them in any particular order, although some of the characters do hop across from book to book. For instance, Mac Donovan, the policewoman in the first book, steps into this story, which is, what if you wanted to change your life before it changed you? And the only way you could make that happen was to escape, put it all behind you. So you made a plan, and that plan was going well until suddenly it wasn't. Our main character wakes up in a hospital. She has no ID. All they find in her pocket is a scrap of paper with Mac Donovan's name on it. They send for Mac, but she doesn't recognise her. Then she hears the doctor fill them in on her injuries. Amnesia. She'd heard them talking all about it. She knew what it was. It happened when you couldn't remember your past. No memories. She almost moaned, but stopped herself. She didn't need to draw attention to herself just at the moment. She needed time to think it through. And it didn't help that her thought processes were still a little erratic. Of course, if Mac Donovan did suddenly remember her, well, all control would be taken out of her hands. Mac Donovan, she swallowed. She would have known Mac anywhere, she thought, as she snuck a peek at her through her closed lids. She was older, of course, weren't they both? Mac could have been about 20 back then. Her hair was shorter. Maturity had only strengthened the planes and angles of her face. It was easy to see why she'd had a huge baby crush on the older woman. How she wished she could have simply greeted her, told her what a positive Mac had been in her negative life. But that would be a mistake. One thing would lead to another. There'd be questions about people and places. Everything she wanted to forget. If anyone needed to have no memories of their past, it was her. Hadn't escaping from that past been her sole focus all these weeks? Nothing in her life was going to change. Running was all she had left. She'd always dreamed of something better for her entire life, probably. But specifically, she'd been actually physically running for 3 months now. She'd heard one of the nurses mention the date this morning, so she knew exactly. It would be 3 months tomorrow that she left home. Home. She bit off a laugh, such as it was. She hadn't thought of anywhere as home in over a decade or more. Before she knew any better, that had been reserved for the nondescript house she'd grown up in, part of the family she'd thought was normal in the beginning, until she'd been old enough to notice the other families in their street, in their suburb. Other families didn't have a nervous, anxious mother or a posturing, unpredictable father who would disappear for days or weeks and who'd return all full of himself, or worse still, he'd be depressed and angry. Even Lucia's family was an improvement on her own until she realised how wrong she'd been about that too. She'd known for quite some time there was nothing to keep her here, and more painfully, nothing worth staying for. Her only hope was to disappear off the proverbial face of the earth. But amnesia, the word flashed into her mind again. It would be all the cover she'd need, wouldn't it? And suddenly she was tired again, and her eyelids fell. So then we come to our other heroine. Bear with me with my voice box. It'll be up and down. Louisa Baxter, her mother had stated at breakfast, running her eyes over her daughter's neat uniform. You're working too hard at that hospital. What are you doing up so early when you don't have to be? Lou shoved 2 more slices of bread into the toaster for her mother. She had a serious case of bed hair, and Lou hid her grin. The girls won't be stirring for another hour. I'm old. Apparently, they say old people don't need as much sleep. Whoever those all-knowing know-it-alls are that set the benchmarks, probably workaholic daughters, if the truth be known, Cynthia Lawson said grumpily. She put her iPod on the breakfast bar and poured herself a cup of tea. You're not old, Lou said fondly, wishing she had $1 for every time she told her mother that. 64 is not old. So says someone who isn't even 40, almost 40. Next birthday, once you reach the big 40, you'll be far more disinclined to add another year. You mark my words, her mother finished gloomily, and Lou laughed. I'm sure I shall. She balanced her slice of toast on her travel mug of tea and slung her bag over her shoulder. Deanne and Brody both have early lectures, so they'll be taking Deanne's car. You'll have to play taxi and drop Em off at school this morning, okay? Cynthia saluted. Okay, ma Capitan. All right, there on my iPad, with alarms, thanks to my technology-obsessed granddaughters. More to the point, how come you're going into work early again? 2 staff off sick, you know how it is. I know that you're far too good-natured to refuse when you're asked to step in, Cynthia frowned. The magic word is no. Learn to say it once in a while. I often do, just not today. The older woman sighed. You look nice. Well, thank you, Ma. Don't ma me, you do. Look nice, I mean. I like your hair like that. Lou checked the tight bun at the back of her head, concentrating on preventing a sudden urge to blush. It's sensible. It keeps my hair out of the way. I had a bit of extra time this morning, so I tried for something more professional than my usual sort of I'm in a hurry messy bun. And I'm getting too old for ponytails. Rubbish. Anyway, that looks, her mother paused, classy. Classy? I'll take that. We nurses aim for classy. You're blushing. Is there someone who's caught your eye? Caught my... Lou stopped as she was about to take a bite of a toast. She felt heat warm her cheeks again. Oh, for heaven's sake, Mum, who? You know everyone I work with. If they haven't caught my eye by now, they're not going to, wouldn't you say? And I'm not blushing. Okay, it's just the heat in the kitchen then. No pun or whatever intended. You aren't blushing, my mistake. Someone who's pushing 40 wouldn't blush. She held up her hand when Luz gave her an indignant look. No one knew on staff then. Good grief, there it was. Her mother's signature knowing smirk. She was a master of that irritating expression. Well, Lou wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. She could bet she'd already cross-examined her granddaughter about the comings and goings at the hospital. Brodie would have been just as eager to share. Lately, their project seemed to be to find her a date. Lou needed that like she needed a hole in the head. Are you ignoring your mother, Lou Baxter? Never. The lovely old crone won't let me. Lou concentrated on her slice of toast and signed in resignation. I'm willing to bet my daughter has shared all the information you so desperately need, as totally unfathomable as that need may be. And she held her mother's gaze and mimed a yawn. How boring the said info is. Brodie and I just make idle conversation. You could try talking to me more often yourself. Getting anything out of you is like pulling teeth. It's not as though you're guarding secrets that would put national security to risk. Oh, yes, national security, Lou chuckled again, as if I'd even recognise anything like that if I heard it. Before it filtered through, any international incident would have been and gone, all part of yesterday's news. Then, for some inexplicable reason, she had a picture of a group of police personnel murmuring together outside a hospital room and a small damaged figure in a hospital bed. It's the only place you're going to meet anyone, Cynthia continued. You're either here or at the hospital. You know, Brodie never tells me anything personal. Quite truthfully, I'm not even interested in patient ailments. I can conjure up enough of my own at my age. Let me tell you, I get any number of organ recitals down at the senior sits. I don't need to know that. Hang on, just a sec. I don't need to know that sort of personal information. For example, Brodie didn't tell me where Mavis Hughes had a nasty carbuncle. Having her arrive at bingo with a bright purple ring cushion and the pained expression on her face when she sat down kind of gave the game away. Mum, for heaven's sake, enough, Lou exclaimed with as much authority as she could muster after she'd hastily swallowed a laugh. Mavis Hughes is a lovely woman. She'd be mortified if she knew we were invading her privacy. So no more about anyone's medical procedures, and most definitely no more matchmaking. I repeat, I don't have the time or the inclination to exhaust myself trying to fit a relationship into my busy, and she paused for emphasis, perfectly satisfying life, okay? Ooh, my mother, my daughter, the scary boss, so terrifying. Mum, please, Lou begged. Can we put this dull and uninteresting subject to rest again? Or if you keep pushing me into this conversational corner, I just might be forced to quiz you about a certain guy at the Senior Citizens Club. Humph, murmured her mother. Is Artie Parker still saving you a seat at bingo? So nice of him, Lou added with an innocent look. Her mother pursed her lips. Aren't you going to be late for work? Bye, Mum. Have a good day. Love you heaps. As she hurried toward the hospital, the bruised face of their Jane Doe flashed into her mind, and she quickened a step. For some reason, the wounded young woman huddled in the hospital bed struck a chord deep inside her, more so than any of her previous patients over the years. This young woman had suffered a huge trauma, and she needed Lou, and of course her staff, to nurse her back to health. The agitated hand that clutched hers, seeking assurance and safety, and the dark, wounded eyes she had trouble getting out of her mind, were simply a part of it, part of her job. Rationally, that's what it was. Right. She was rational, almost 40-year-old Lou Baxter. She headed into the hospital, and the rest will be revealed in here. It has Seeking a New Life, Finding a Family, and Finding Love. There are quirky characters and some suspense, and it finishes with a romantic and satisfying happily ever after. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Elena for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Lyn. I just posted Lyn's contact information in the on Amazon, where you can find her other books, in the chat. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. You can raise your hand, which AI didn't see me that time. You can raise your hand and ask your question directly. You can put your question in the chat. I think it's great that we've had such a wide variety of readings here today. It's not just romance, it's not just erotica. We even had a dystopian novel. I've always been amazed at people who can write dystopian novels and not get completely depressed. So I'd like to hear more about that whole process.
It's funny that you say that because that's kind of what my mission statement was when I wrote it. So I wrote the bulk of this when I had just started working full time, which is, I'm sure everyone knows, soul crushing and horrible. And I was also really struggling, like in terms of like social justice and the environment and all of these causes that I believe in. It's like I was really struggling to find the energy and the strength to like, you know, act on those things. And it also was really struggling with like that sense of like anything that you do is meaningless and can we even make any changes, et cetera, et cetera. And so as I was writing this book, it was kind of like all about going through those concepts and like creating like a sort of worst case scenario world, but then also thinking through like in this worst case scenario world, what small things can we do and what small actions matter and like how can you find that strength when everything feels totally hopeless, you know? So that was kind of my mission statement was to try to find a little bit of hope in like the depressingness.
Sandy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Lyn. Hello, also from Brisbane. What sort of changes have you seen in your audience over your career?
Oh, well, more sex.
Yeah, yeah, I thought so.
I think possibly when I started writing, it was more about coming out of the closet, and there was some reason that you were in the closet. Now, of course, people can be out of the closet quite easily, so that's not as big a part of the plot as it used to be. That's probably the best thing I could say with that.
Okay, thanks, Lyn.
More questions for our authors? Gail Teller wrote, Samira, I've not read a lot of dystopian novels, but this one sounds so interesting.
Thank you so much.
There's a question by Joey. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, here we are. I have a question for Samira. So I'm a friend of Samira's, but I actually want to ask Samira, I want to ask how it became a queer dystopian novel. What, like, how, and I don't know how to ask
How the
the
queerness got
question.
in there.
Yeah.
Also, first of all, hi Joey.
Hi.
I haven't seen this friend of mine for many years, everybody, and she's come to support me, so it's really nice. So it's actually a great question because the idea came to me before I realized I was queer. So as Joey knows, I didn't come out until I was 25, so a little bit later in life. I kind of like was like, oh, I'm probably bi, but like, who needs labels, etc. until then. And so I hadn't really put a romance into the story, or I think I had like kind of like a vague idea for a hetero one that, I immediately tossed. And then as I came out of the closet and I started engaging more with queers in the queer community, and um, I feel like it is actually quite connected to what I was talking about before in terms of social justice and things like that. Just I don't know. I mean, for one thing, obviously, like it had to be queer now because I was queer and I wasn't going to write something straight, you know. But also, like, I realized that one of the reasons why it took me so long to come out was because I love sci-fi and fantasy. And so I'm reading it all the time and it's all straight, you know. So I was never seeing myself reflected in these things that I really love to read or I love to watch and everything. And so, yeah, it became a little bit of a mission statement in that way as well.
There's a question in the chat. How do you decide on the genre to write in that you do?
Is that for everybody?
I think it's for everyone.
I'll just go first since I'm unmuted, if that's all right. For me, I just write in the genre that I love to read. So sci-fi and fantasy. My next series will be a high fantasy series.
Well, I'll go next. Why do I write romance? Well, my mother used to tell a story about me when I was about 4. We were driving past the cemetery, and I said to my mother, "What's that?" And she was caught on the hop a bit, and she said, "Well, when you die, they bury you and put you under the nice green grass, and there's flowers, and those little markers have your name on it, so everyone will know where to find you." And I gave that some thought, and I said, "No, no, no, I didn't want to be put under the grass. Leave me on top of the grass so that Prince Charming could come riding up on his charger and find me." Of course, a little bit down the track, it was more a case of Prince Charming coming along and being moving right along, nothing to see here. I'm waiting for the princess. So that was why I wrote romance. What else could I have written?
I personally write erotica not just because, I think like, it's tantalizing and sexy and that sort of thing. But there's something about sex that can allow you to see someone in moments that you wouldn't otherwise see them. It is single-handedly the most vulnerable position you can be in and the most powerful. And I really love writing it for that reason.
Well, I just write honestly whatever is in my head. So I like romance plays like a theme, but I always feel like romance is digestible and you can then hide your many messages behind content that a lot of people pick up. But there's a lot going on up here. So it's not just romance all the time. It's whatever characters are saying and popping into my mind with.
Wait, can I expand on my answer because everyone else's answers were so good?
Yes, absolutely. Go for it. Your
I just,
answer was also good, but go on.
well, I just wanted to say that the other reason why I write sci-fi and fantasy is because I think as a teenager, they allowed me an escape into a magical world, and that
Mm.
was essential for my survival. And I think being able to provide that for people, if I can, is kind of the whole reason why I write it all. So.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I worked in the publishing industry, and one of my jobs was to analyze marketplace trends and sales and that kind of stuff. And I will tell you that romance is the biggest category of any in both straight and lesbian fiction. So if you write romance, you're throwing yourself into a bigger marketplace. I guess one question would be, does there have to be a romance in a lesbian novel in order to make it a lesbian novel?
My mother's a librarian, and we've had this conversation a fair few times, and she repeatedly tells me no. She says that the only important thing about romance itself is that it ends in happily ever after. But when it comes to lesbian fiction, the only important thing is that the main character is a lesbian. So that would be my mother's political answer.
There's a question from Henrietta in the chat, and it's how do you decide where to set your books? Some are in Australia, others in the US.
Is that for everyone? Again, I'm
Yes,
assuming
it's
that's
for
for everyone.
everyone. It's not.
I mean, my first is that five? Five up there. They're all set in the US. But that was also because I did notice that I had a lot more American readers than I did Australian. However, that being said, I am about to take the leap and pen a series that is Australian based, which I'm super excited about to get really super local. I can't wait.
For me, when I did the character voices, it was very American. And so I set it in an American twin town, growing up in an Australian twin town in Albury, Wodonga. And I based it on a bit of my livelihood, but I did a lot of research and had a lot of friends in America who helped me try and iron that out. But my next book has a character that she is Australian, and then she has the cultural awakening of going into the US and experiencing that, because I thought that that would be a fun point of view for American audiences to witness, as someone coming across their culture and just being like, oh, okay. And the biggest thing that my editor said with that book is I kept writing the word CBD, and she kept going, no one in the US will know what that is. So, yeah, it was fun.
Well, I think I always choose somewhere that I knew, and I was lucky because we moved around a bit when I was younger, except for my series that I made up my own town, because it is based on a town down near Canberra, but I don't live down there and I didn't know enough about it to keep writing books about it. So I made my own town with my own streets, and I know where the bookshop is and all the different places that appear in the books. So it's sort of my town.
I mean, I set mine in fictional universes, so, but I think Wasteland specifically is post-apocalyptic, and but is meant to be kind of our world. And I did imagine it as Australia, but I haven't made that explicit anywhere, and I don't think it makes a difference to the story if like American readers are imagining that it's in America or whatever. But I'm certainly not going to, I don't know, they're not going to find a buried Statue of Liberty or whatever. So it'll be, in my mind, Australia.
Well, again, from marketplace analysis, the US is the biggest market. And we used to have a Canadian distributor. We knew that only 10% of our sales went up to Canada, which is obviously next door to us. And of course, they're not too happy with Americans right now with all the nonsense. But do you feel that there's too much American influence in lesbian fiction? Has it dominated the voices? Do you ever feel like you're not being represented enough?
I don't think it's necessarily like a domination. Like, I think that it's something like, I mean, you look at like with the television that we get, and most of it is American just because of how their production is and like their capacity to make those TV shows and such is a bit different from Australia, though Australia is definitely up and rising. And you've got like the UK and you've got Europe and you've got Asia and such. But it is one of those things that I think it's just because when it comes down to just Netflix and streaming, and even before that, when it came to free to air TV and what they licensed, it was so American that a lot of people took that on. So it feels connected. Like I grew up on Sesame Street. That's not Australian. It's not Play School. I mean, I grew up on Play School too, but I definitely grew up on Sesame Street.
It's interesting here in the UK. So I've, visiting my sister, she has two kids. And as well as having a lot of like UK television content, like way more than Australia, they also like when they get American cartoons, they redo the voices with English accents, which I find really interesting because we don't do that in Australia. So it's like I think it's like they're trying to keep their culture protected or whatever, and we don't have that. But I don't think that it's particularly an issue in lesbian fiction. Like I think maybe just, all English language fiction, if any. Like,
Well, maybe I should ask it another way. Is there a particular Australian character, not book character, obviously, but, and in fact, countries can become characters, places, but is there something missing in our lesbian fiction? Henrietta was trying to get folks together to read for this event today, and she said Australians are shy. Are there characteristics of Australians that you would like us who are in other parts of the world to know about that we're
It
missing?
was it was like pulling teeth.
I can answer that. That's a very quick thing for me. Australia has tall poppy syndrome. We do not like people who stand up above. We tend to cut
True,
them
very
down.
true.
So when it comes down to like shyness, it's this thing of being like, oh no, I shouldn't, this sort of thing. Whereas I feel like a lot of other countries, like my experience personally, is that like the US and Europe don't tend to have the same level of tall poppy syndrome that Australia has, which I think definitely comes from the UK as well. But Samira might know a bit more than me.
yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't think the UK actually has it even as much as Australia. I think it's pretty baked into Australian society, and it kind of makes sense if you consider the history. I, the thing that I'm thinking when you ask this question, I don't know if anyone's read the book Wild by Cheryl Strayed, but I read that book, and then not long after, I read the book Tracks, which is by an Australian autobiography, very similar. They both involve like a woman alone doing a long, long walk, right? And the big difference that I noticed was that Wild, like I liked both of them. I loved Wild actually more, I would say, but Wild was so much more emotional and dramatic and putting meaning into everything. And Trax was like, here's what happened. And then I got here, and then I got here. My dog died, I was sad, and I'm here, And it was very like business-like, almost dry in a way, but at the same time, it really kind of had that I don't know, it just felt really Australian. And I was overseas when I read it, so I was getting really homesick,
I feel like as well though, like my experience, even like just watching, Australian TV versus American TV, the way we interact, talk, humor is so completely different to I think what you see on American TV. And even like what you were saying, Henrietta, about not being able to get readers and it was like pulling teeth. I always call it like Aussies are kind of guilty of like the humble brag where we won't we won't come out and say anything until you like put us on the spot. So chasing us up over the internet is going to be really hard. But if you confronted someone to their face, it would be the humblest brag you ever heard, but you would hear about it.
See, I always enjoy reading about different places. I, I
Me
love
too.
I love the ability of fiction to allow us to experience other places. And that's why I myself, I'm a New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn and raised in Westchester, which is right outside of New York City. I went to college in New York. I now live in Maine, and I've set a series of novels in Maine. And curiously enough, lots of lesbian books are set in Maine. And when I read these books, I'm like, that's not how it's like here. But they want to be here. So is there something wonderful about Australia that would make us all want to go there and experience what you experience living there?
I
Meeting
highly recommend the
that.
TV series Deadlock for Tasmania. I
Oh,
think that that's a show that everyone should watch. I think it really encapsulates Australia humor more so than anything else. But it shows a less dry version of Australia. Otherwise, NCIS Sydney is a hilarious, definitely produced by Sydney TV show if you want to see all the cool parts of Sydney. They're the two things that I recommend watching.
I think that the best things about Australia are hard to get across in fiction. Like I think for me, the things that I am most passionate about when it comes to Australia as a country is like the country, like the landscape, the bush, the rocks, like all those things. And most people don't want to sit there reading 3 pages of like descriptions of nature, you know. But that's the thing that I think is the most special, it's the most unique.
Henrietta? No? Okay.
Just a mistake. But I love to travel to via a book, and especially Australia and New Zealand. I have fond memories of visiting.
I
Okay.
just like, can I just say that when I first started writing lesbian with Naiad Press, I used to feel sometimes that the editors were always trying to make me American in the way I was talking. And I did really stick my toes in, which I don't usually do. I'm usually very, very laid back. But I did used to dig my toes in and say, look, I will use this Australianism, but I will use it in such a way and in such a context that you will know what it is. And we sort of met halfway like that. Because I really can't, I mean, one of the biggest arguments I had was over dialogue where somebody said, I study math without an S. Australians don't say that. They say maths with an S. And I said, please, can you just put the S on? And they said, yes, yes, yes. And then they didn't. I still bear that grudge.
Yeah, I have two editors with my second book that's coming out. And when it came, so my first editor is Lee Winter, who's Australian. She's brilliant. And she was really good. I loved working with her. And my second editor is not from Australia. And so she, and don't get me wrong, she definitely understood the market, but she was always pushing with me. She was always like, the US market won't understand this. And I'm like, but the main character is Australian. So she's going to say these things. She's going to say CBD. She's not going to say Central Business District. Because I don't know any Australian who goes, the Central Business District of Sydney. We always go CBD.
We do.
And there are like lots of things like, she'll be right. And, you know, yeah, nah. And she goes, well, this doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, I don't want to change it. Like the main character, she's Australian. Like she's like pure Australian too. Like she's not going to cut herself down just to be understood. So it was a real fight with my second editor.
I can identify with that.
Apparently, even John Marsden had that experience, which, for those who don't know, is a very famous Australian young adult author. Also, Lyn, I totally relate to your math thing. I hate that, the singular math.
Yes.
If I just thought of a lesbian web series that people should watch if you're wanting to get an idea of kind of like Australian like lesbian culture, called Starting From Now. I don't know if anyone's seen that one, but it's set in like the inner west of Sydney, which is like where all the lesbians congregate in Sydney.
Yes. Great series. 10 out of 10 recommend.
Okay, so we're just about out of time now. So any last minute questions for our guests? Okay. Well, let me thank you all, Thea, Samira, Lyn, and Shay, for joining us at this very late hour for you. And I've put the links to our guests' books in the chat, so I think that gets preserved also, the notes in the recording. So, but if you would like to get to know them better, you can find them there. And thanks again, as I said, all of you for joining us. And until next time in the
Great.
Lesbian Fiction Campfire. Take
Okay.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
too.
you.
Cheers.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.